More than 5 million people in Florida are under evacuation orders with the impending arrival of Hurricane Milton. It's the most powerful Category 5 storm with ferocious winds of up to 270 kilometres an hour. Let's take you live to Tampa, Florida. Now, Milton is expected to hit the Tampa area later, and as we were saying, with ferocious winds of up to 160 miles an hour, that's around 270 kilometres an hour. And as we were saying in the introduction there, that's why President Joe Biden has warned that leaving now is a matter of life and death, as the state's undertaken its largest evacuation effort in years. Well, they say that it's going to make landfall in the coming hours and has the potential to be one of the most destructive to ever be recorded in the region. Well, of course, it comes less than a fortnight after Hurricane Helene, another powerful hurricane, hit Florida. Steve Nibbs has more.
An evacuation siren on the streets of Reddington Shores in Florida. Debris is still piled up after Storm Helene 2 weeks ago, and now people are being told they have to leave again. Mandatory evacuation orders are in place for nearly 6 million people. As Hurricane Milton approaches, many are heading to safety as authorities warn that storm surges could be up to 15 feet, with warnings that if you stay when told to leave, you may not survive.
We can rebuild homes, we can rebuild businesses, we can get people back on their feet, but only if they're safe and they survive the storm. We're not going to be able to bring people back who stay behind in 10 or 15 feet of storm surge.
Hurricane Milton is intensifying, now a Category 5 with speeds around 165 miles per hour. This crew from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, dubbed Hurricane Hunters, flew through it yesterday and felt its power.
Damn.
On the ground, residents are doing what they can to protect their properties before they leave. But there's real fear here.
Apprehensive, really anxious. We have 2 young kids. It's scary.
Over 50 counties are now under a state of emergency, but not everyone is deciding to flee.
We got 4 5-gallon cans.
Tommy Hall and his family live near Venice Beach, and they've chosen to weather the incoming storm.
We got gas, food, 2 generators, portable air conditioners to push around to room, so I think we may do okay.
But weather forecasters are now warning of the severity and danger of this storm.
It has dropped 50 millibars in 10 hours.
Tracking Hurricane Milton, forecaster John Morales broke down on air because of fears of what's to come.
Everything that's going on really does affect you emotionally. And yeah, my delivery of trying to carry an audience through these type of emergencies, I think it's become certainly not the same non-alarmist style it was before. I am alarmed.
Milton's strength has already brought flooding along the Mexican coast and downed power lines and trees. But the US is bracing itself for much worse, with officials saying that Milton has the potential to be one of the most destructive hurricanes on record when it makes landfall later today. Steve Nibbs, BBC News.
Well, our correspondent Gordon Carrera is in Tampa in Florida, and he's been talking to people who have been preparing for the arrival of Hurricane Milton.
Here in Tampa, there is a sense of time running out ahead of Milton's really now imminent arrival. The streets in the city have been eerily quiet. Hardly anyone's around. The few people who we have seen have been preparing their homes or their offices for the storm, boarding things up, maybe moving things around. I think one of the things that's quite shocking is just, as you can see around me, the devastation which is still here from Hurricane Helene, which hit 2 weeks ago. And there's an enormous amount of debris around, particularly where I am in Tampa. And the concern is that the massive surge which will come with Milton could lift up all this debris, move it around, cause even more damage. And the fear is that the surge with Milton could be 12 feet or perhaps even more high compared to about half that or less with Helene. So could be very significant indeed. There's a lot of work going on already to think about how the community will respond afterwards. But first of all, they've got to get through that storm, which is now just really hours away from arriving here.
Gordon Carrera on the ground there. Well, the National Hurricane Centre in the United States expects Hurricane Milton to make landfall as an extremely dangerous hurricane. The BBC's Sophie Rayworth explains why climate change is thought to be behind the ferocity of the storm.
Well, Hurricane Milton will be the second powerful storm to hit Florida in less than 2 weeks, and it is currently travelling across the Gulf of Mexico. You can see its path there, and warm waters in the Gulf of Mexico have helped it become a dangerous hurricane that is expected to make landfall as early as tomorrow. Now, scientists say that climate change is to blame, with much warmer seas supercharging these hurricanes. These are the normal range of temperatures for the Atlantic, and this should be just about here where they are now. But look how much warmer the waters are this year, at or near the hottest temperatures on record. The oceans absorb most of the extra heat that carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases trap near Earth's surface. So warmer seas mean more water evaporates, and that allows storms to strengthen and grow.
Sophie Rayworth there. Well, let's speak to Professor Miles Allen, a climate physicist at the University of Oxford. Welcome to the programme. A lot of people want to know how much climate change might be playing a part in this, because, of course, there always is a hurricane season in the United States, but you don't regularly see storms of this ferocity, Category 5.
That's right. I mean, we've always had hurricanes in this part of the world. Hurricanes are these giant engines for turning energy from warm ocean temperatures into kinetic energy of the air. And of course, if you increase the octane in the fuel, so to speak, by warming up sea surface temperatures, as Sophie Rayworth was saying, you allow hurricanes to get more intense. And we have seen an intensification in lots of indicators of hurricane activity since the 1980s. The longer term picture is a bit less clear, but that coincides with a period of rapidly rising sea surface temperatures, much of which is down to human influence on climate.
And in terms of what might come next in terms of this storm, you know, when you track this as a physicist, what could come next?
Well, crucially for storm activity, or for this storm itself, we are getting much better at forecasting hurricane intensity and hurricane tracks, which does help enormously in terms of saving lives. Of course, it can't really, I mean, it can help people protect their properties, but they still do enormous damage. So one of the really good news stories here is how well forecast hurricanes are compared to what they would have been a few decades ago. But the longer term outlook is worrying, of course, because we are, as sea surface temperatures continue to warm, we will see more intense storms of this nature. How many more? You know, it's like rolling a dice. You know, if the dice is a little bit loaded, you can't say every time you roll it exactly how many sixes you're going to get. But you know, we are loading it in that direction.
And when you look at the history of the intensification of these hurricanes and linking that to climate change, what lessons can you draw from that? I mean, of course, we remember Hurricane Katrina. That was a Category 5 hurricane. That was, nearly close to 20 years ago now. What can you draw from the lessons in the past decade or two?
I mean, the important lesson is climate change is making certain types of extreme weather more intense. It's also making other kinds of extreme weather less intense in other parts of the world. And we are having to cope with a changing climate as a result of human influence, as a result of rising greenhouse gas concentrations. But the really important message I think I'd really like your viewers to get is that we can stop it. We could stop global warming within a generation if we put our minds to it. The combination of reducing the amount of carbon dioxide we produce from burning fossil fuels and responsible disposal of the remainder. And in that regard, I mean, Britain's got a pretty good track record of reducing the amount of carbon dioxide we produce from fossil fuels. And the announcement last week of the government that we're going to start responsibly disposing of carbon dioxide back under the North Sea is also very welcome. So there are steps in the right direction, but we've got a long way to go.
OK, Professor Miles Allen, thank you very much for taking us through those elements of the story. Climate physicist there at the University of Oxford. Thank you very much. just to say we have more on the developments surrounding Hurricane Milton on the BBC News website, where we continue to run a live page. It has a live stream as well, and there's plenty of updates, of course, as we continue to track that storm.